First 40 days is like an argument, because the question is, when does the soul come down? And most opinions say from the 40th day on, and prior to that it's like, my bialma, it's merely water, and it's not even a fetus. But there's some opinions that say from conception on, it's like the soul comes in then, you can't have an abortion. But so that's a very, very strict opinion. Most opinions are not like that. Most say the first 40 it's just water bialma, it's just merely water. But like Levi said, you can't just say, hey, I want my water flushed out, because in Judaism we don't have elective surgeries, right? So you have to have a really good reason. But you can get them. You can usually get a heter, because a woman says, I'm frantic, I just did something horrible last night, I was with this guy, he's not even Jewish, he's not even a doctor or a lawyer, he's
a blogger.
He's a fucking blogger, for Christ's sake. What was I thinking?
He told me he didn't want me to drive drunk, and so he invited me back to his place. And because there were two of us girls, he said there wouldn't be a problem with yichud. And then, we just like lying down, and one thing led to another.
Right, and I made the mistake of rubbing his belly.
Yeah, and suddenly it changed the whole characteristic of our relationship.
Even though she was homely, right? Okay, so what am I saying here? So, she can go and say she's just frantic. She's like, I'm going to kill myself if I have to have this child, and then she can usually get her heter, because they'll be like, okay, because this is like going to cause massive trauma.
Heter means permission.
You're probably going to get permission, and I know women who have had abortions in almost those exact circumstances. Much harder to get it, by the way. Well, I won't say anything because it depends on the Rav.
Yeah.
But basically, it depends on the Rav, I'm sure, and each one has like their own way of viewing the halacha on this. But if the woman can show like she's traumatized, and this is like gonna like destroy her, then in the first 40 days she's usually pretty good. But after the 40th day, you're busted. You're not gonna get it.
Exodus chapter 21, verse 28. If an ox kills, the ox is put to death. So I think if a mentally ill person kills, he too should be put to death, because he knows more about what he's doing than does an ox. It's not right to allow those who take human life to live. So just imagine like there's an ox and it killed your mama, and then you allow the ox to keep grazing, and people walk by and go, hey, Rav says the ox that killed your mama.
Well, that's the reason why we put it to death.
Yeah, it's not right.
But that's not what you were talking about, though.
So then, like, imagine a mentally ill person. If a mentally ill person doesn't know what he's doing and he just, like, kills someone because he's mentally ill, then I think that the mentally ill person should be put to death, because he's clearly a danger because he doesn't know the difference between right and wrong.
Okay, hold on. Let me attack all this. Can I respond? Okay. Two things on this. I'm gonna attack this from two ends. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the first thing you were saying, good, because this looks like a straw man. Because you're saying that the ox is put to death, and the mentally ill person at least should have some sort of inkling more and know what he's doing than the ox. So since we put the ox to death, so how much more so we should put the human being to death, because he should have known better.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a straw man, so I'll get rid of that Kal V'chomer, because that's not the reason why we put the ox to death. We put the ox to death for the reason you articulated, that it's like you can't have the ox grazing in front after it just killed your mom. It's too much of a trauma for the relatives of the victim to have to see that damn animal out there every day, and that's the reason. It's not because the animal knows or doesn't know what it's doing when it committed the act. It's because what it represents to the victims to have to see that. So we put the animal to death. Now, that's one point. Whereas the crazy person, right, who killed somebody, we're going to get into the crazy person in a second. You can't say, according to Torah, I don't want to have to see this human being out there because that human being killed my mom, so we should put that person to death. We don't treat human beings like animals. Okay? An animal you can put to death because it's not a human being, and I don't care. You know what really drives me crazy is when like some animal rights people try to make the moral equivalency of animals with human beings. And they say, animals are people too. No, animals are not people, and I find it offensive and morally obtuse to make such a comparison. morally obtuse at the very least. That's what like Hitler did with the Nazis, you know. Now it's a Godwin because I did it, right? Right? But that's what like Hitler did with the Nazis, because he like tried to say like, you know, first he dehumanized the Jews by saying, oh, they're less than human. So basically he brought us down to the level of animals. And once it's an animal, then you can do whatever you want to it. You can experiment on it like he did. Like, you know, they did these experiments and everything. And then you can just like exterminate them like you would like put a dog to sleep in the kennel. You can put the Jews to sleep in the concentration camp. That's what the Nazis did to us. I'm always very nervous of people who cannot draw the line between animals and humans. Okay? So to say, oh, I don't like looking at the human out there, so let's put him to sleep. That's like saying I can't stand looking at the Jews moving into my fucking neighborhood. Let's gas them all. That's like how the Nazis viewed Jews. You understand what I'm saying there? It's the same, I don't like these people. Let's get rid of them. They're not human. They're less than human. So that we don't say. Torah never makes such a statement. Now, from the other side, I want to talk about what's the idea of understand and comprehend. Last week in the chat, Chaim Amalek, your friend, was asking about the case of the Tucson shootings and saying that guy is insane, and therefore what was the guy's name?
Jared Loughner.
Thank you. Jared Loughner, according to Chaim Amalek, is insane, and therefore he could plead insanity and get off, or whatever. They don't really get off. They get sent to a mental institution or something. I don't know. Well, here's the thing. So he asked me the question, what does Torah say about an insanity plea? And I said, if I remember correctly, that Torah has three categories of people who are pater mitzvahs, who are exempt from the Torah, from the laws of the Torah, and they are the herish, sheter, or cotton. The herish is the deaf person. The cotton is the
crazy.
Katan.
Oh, the bridegroom.
That's a chatan.
Oh.
Cotton is a minor.
Oh, okay.
That's a child. So a person who can't hear, the child, and also the shota, which is the fool, which is the crazy person. So Torah has it. And I said, definitely if a person is crazy and they can't understand the difference between, you know, right and wrong, so they can't be held responsible, they don't have to put on like tefillin. Mitzvahs, positive mitzvahs, sure they don't have to keep. I wasn't sure on negative commandments, so I looked it up. And sure enough, they don't have to follow the negative commandments, because they can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy, is what the Torah says. If you don't know the difference between reality and fantasy, you're not held responsible for any of the Torah, even the negative commandments.
So anyone who thinks porn is real can't be held accountable
that
to
would
the
be
Torah.
that would be at first glance. That's what you might think. I'll explain it. Let me just finish this piece. So, no, it would be anybody who thinks that like a lot of these women's breasts here in L.A. are real. That would be the test. You know what I mean? Okay. So what am I saying here? So like my nephew says, whenever Luke has a chance, he will try to insert sex into the conversation. And when you do, it throws
sex rears its ugly head.
It's like every 10 minutes, like, hasn't been sex in 10 minutes, so let's shove it in there. It's like in movies today. There's like a 90-minute movie. They always have to stick a sex scene in, and it's like, what was that in there for? It's a movie about cars, for Christ's sake, right? It's like we're talking about like oxes and like Luke's got it. Like, what does this have to do with porn? You know? All right, so what are we saying here? I can't remember, for crying out loud.
Saying when is someone exempt from being held accountable to the Torah? Like how disconnected from reality? That's what he said.
Reality versus fantasy, right? If they don't get it. So the Torah has like a definition. It's like 3 criteria you have to meet. Like one is like if you rip your clothing and you like hang out. I think you have to like hang out at night in a graveyard naked or something like that.
Who hasn't done that?
You know, it's like I'm heading there right after the show.
Exactly.
'Cause I usually rip up my clothing in the graveyard.
Yeah.
It's one of my minhag. There's a third one. I don't remember, but
write
they're like
a blog.
right.
Update your blog every day.
Fist pump. Okay, so you do that. So like there's 3, and then the Torah says if you only do 2, so like, you know.